Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. The aroma of sizzling steak filled the kitchen as I put the finishing touches on our Valentine's Day dinner. Lena would be home soon, and everything had to be perfect. I adjusted the roses in the crystal vase, their deep red petals a stark contrast against the crisp white tablecloth. 15 years of marriage, and I still wanted to sweep her off her feet. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Frowning, I wiped my hands on a nearby dish towel. Who could that be? I wasn't expecting anyone, and Lena had her key. I opened the door to find a young man standing there, clutching a bouquet of wildflowers. His eyes widened slightly as they met mine. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice tinged with irritation. He cleared his throat. Yeah. Is Lena home?" My frown deepened. "No, she's not. Who are you?" "I'm Trevor," he said, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "I'm here to pick her up." A cold feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. Pick her up? For what? Trevor's brow furrowed. "For our date. We've been planning this for weeks." "Who are you?" Before I could answer, I heard the click of heels behind me. I turned to see Lena standing in the hallway, her face pale. "Lena," I said, my voice low. "What's going on?" She took a deep breath, her eyes darting between Trevor and me. "Blake, I'm leaving you." The words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered back a step, my mind reeling. What? What are you talking about?" Lena's chin lifted, a hint of defiance in her eyes. "I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. I'm in love with Trevor." I looked at the man standing in my doorway, this stranger who had apparently stolen my wife's heart. Rage bubbled up inside me, hot and fierce. Without thinking, I lunged forward, my fist connecting with Trevor's jaw. He stumbled backward, dropping the flowers. "Blake!" Lena shrieked, grabbing my arm. "Stop it. If you touch him again, I swear I'll press charges." I shook her off, my chest heaving. "Press charges? You're cheating on me, and you're threatening me?" "This is exactly why I'm leaving," Lena spat. "You're always so quick to anger. I can't live like this anymore." I watched in disbelief as she stepped around me, taking Trevor's arm. "Are you okay?" she asked him softly. He nodded, rubbing his jaw. "I'm fine. Let's just go." "Lena, please," I said, hating the pleading note in my voice. "Don't do this. We can talk about this." She didn't even look at me as she walked away. "There's nothing to talk about, Blake. It's over." I stood in the doorway, watching as my wife of 15 years climbed into a stranger's car and drove away. The steak was burning in the kitchen, filling the house with acrid smoke, but I couldn't bring myself to move. How had this happened? How had I not seen it coming? As the tail lights of Trevor's car disappeared around the corner, a cold resolve settled over me. Lena might think she could just walk away from our marriage, but I wouldn't let her go that easily. If she wanted a fight, she'd get one. I slammed the door shut, my mind already racing with plans. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Hours passed in a blur of whiskey and rage. I paced the living room, my footsteps echoing in the empty house. The flowers I'd bought for Lena lay scattered on the floor, petals crushed beneath my feet. Every surface held a memory of our life together, now tainted by her betrayal. The clock struck midnight when I heard the front door open. Lena stumbled in, her hair disheveled and her makeup smeared. The scent of alcohol and unfamiliar cologne clung to her. "Oh," she said, blinking at me in surprise. "You're still up?" I clenched my fists, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Where have you been?" She waved a hand dismissively. "Out, celebrating my freedom." "Your freedom?" I echoed, incredulous. "Lena, what the hell is going on?" She sighed, kicking off her heels. "I told you, Blake. I'm leaving you. I'm filing for divorce." "Just like that? 15 years of marriage, and you're throwing it away for some kid?" Lena's eyes flashed. "Trevor is not a kid. He's mature and passionate, and he actually listens to me." I stepped closer, my voice low and dangerous. "And I don't? I've given you everything, Lena. Everything. Except what I really needed," she shot back. "I'm bored, Blake. Bored with this house, this life. This marriage. Trevor makes me feel alive again. Her words cut deep, but I refused to let her see how much they hurt. So that's it? You're bored. So you decide to destroy our life together? Lena laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Our life together? You mean your life, Blake? I've just been along for the ride. I grabbed her arm, forcing her to look at me. You don't get to rewrite our history. We built this life together. She yanked her arm away. Let go of me. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're controlling, Blake. Always have been. Controlling? I sputtered. I've given you free rein to do whatever you want. As long as it fits into your perfect little plan, she sneered. Well, guess what? I'm done playing by your rules. I'm taking control of my own life now. I felt a chill run down my spine at the gleam in her eyes. What does that mean? Lena's smile was cold. It means I'm taking half of everything, Blake. The house, the cars, your precious business. I'm entitled to it all. Like hell you are, I growled. Oh, I am, she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. My lawyer says I have a rock-solid case. By the time we're done, you'll be lucky if you have anything left. I stared at her, this stranger wearing my wife's face. How had I never seen this side of her? You really think you can take everything I've worked for? I don't think I know, Lena replied. Face it, Blake. You've lost. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be. As I watched her saunter up the stairs, a cold fury settled in my chest. She thought she had one, but she had no idea what I was capable of. If she wanted a war, I'd give her one she'd never forget. I grabbed my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. It was time to fight fire with fire. Sandra? It's Blake. I need your help. My wife's trying to take me for everything I've got. I want you to make sure she doesn't get a damn thing. As I hung up, a plan began to form in my mind. Lena thought she could betray me and walk away unscathed. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. A knock at the door interrupted my plotting. I opened it to find my sister, Melissa, standing there, concern etched on her face. Blake? What's going on? I've been trying to reach you all night. I stepped aside, letting her in. Lena's leaving me. For another man. Melissa's eyes widened. What? Oh, Blake, I'm so sorry. I shook my head, my jaw clenched. Don't be. She's made her choice. Now I'm making mine. Melissa touched my arm. What are you going to do? I met her gaze, my eyes cold. Whatever it takes to make sure she regrets ever crossing me. The next few days passed in a flurry of activity. While Lena split her time between meeting with her lawyer and her new boy toy, I set my plan in motion. The first step? A generous donation to a highly controversial charity, all in Lena's name. I sat at my desk, phone in hand, speaking to the charity's director. Yes, that's right. A donation of $5 million, in the name of Lena Carrington. The director's voice was filled with excitement. Mr. Carrington, this is incredibly generous. We can't thank you enough. I smiled coldly. Oh, don't thank me. It's all Lena's idea. She's very passionate about your cause. As I hung up, I could already imagine the headlines. Lena's carefully cultivated image as a socialite and philanthropist was about to take a serious hit. Next, I placed a call to a journalist friend of mine. Jack, I've got a story for you. It seems my wife has made a rather interesting donation. I think your readers would be very interested to hear about it. Jack's voice was eager. Give me the details, Blake. This sounds juicy. I fed him the story, painting Lena as a secret supporter of the controversial charity. By the time I was done, Jack was salivating over the potential scandal. This is going to be big, Blake, he said. It'll be front-page news by tomorrow. I'm counting on it, I replied, hanging up with a grim smile. The next morning, the story broke. I watched from my office as Lena's phone began to ring incessantly. Her social media accounts exploded with angry comments and unfollows. The carefully constructed world she'd built for herself was crumbling, piece by piece. It wasn't long before she burst into my office, her face flushed with anger. What the hell did you do? I looked up from my computer, the picture of innocence. I'm sorry. She slammed a newspaper down on my desk. The headline screamed, Socialite Lena Carrington secretly funds controversial charity. This, she hissed. How dare you? I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm. I have no idea what you're talking about, Lena. Isn't this the charity you've been so passionate about? Her eyes narrowed. Don't play dumb with me, Blake. I know you're behind this. I stood up, meeting her gaze. Prove it. She faltered for a moment, realizing she had no evidence. My friends are abandoning me. The country club is talking about revoking my membership. You've ruined everything? A cold smile played at my lips. Have I? Or have you done that all on your own? Lena's hand shot out, aiming for my face, but I caught her wrist easily. Careful, I warned. You wouldn't want to add salt to your growing list of problems, would you? She yanked her hand away, tears of frustration welling in her eyes. You won't get away with this, Blake. I'll make you pay. As she stormed out of my office, I felt a surge of satisfaction. This was just the beginning. Lena had no idea what was coming next. Over the next few weeks, I watched as Lena's social standing crumbled. Her phone stopped ringing. Invitations to galas and charity events dried up. Even her so-called friends began to distance themselves, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. Through it all, I maintained my innocence. Whenever questioned, I expressed shock and disappointment at Lena's secret support of such a controversial cause. It was a masterful performance, if I do say so myself. As Lena's world fell apart, I felt a grim satisfaction. She had thought she could betray me and walk away unscathed. Now she was learning the hard way that actions have consequences. But this was just the opening salvo. I had much bigger plans in store for Lena and her young lover. They thought they could build their happiness on the ruins of my life. I would show them just how wrong they were. As I sat in my office, reviewing the latest reports of Lena's social downfall, I felt more resolved than ever. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice, about making sure that those who crossed me paid the price. Lena had made her choice. Now she would have to live with the consequences. And I would be there every step of the way, making sure she never forgot the mistake she'd made in betraying me. The satisfaction of watching Lena's social life crumble wasn't enough. My thirst for revenge had only grown stronger, and now it was time to turn my attention to the other half of this betrayal, Trevor. I sat in my car outside Trevor's workplace, a mid-sized marketing firm. Through my contacts, I'd learned he was an up-and-coming account manager. Well, not for long. I picked up my phone and dialed the number I'd obtained for Trevor's boss. Hello, Mr. Hoffman? This is Blake Carrington. I have some information about one of your employees that I think you should know. Hoffman's voice was cautious. Mr. Carrington? What's this about? I smiled coldly. It's about Trevor Sanders. Are you aware that he's been using company resources to pursue personal projects? And that he's been inflating his billable hours? There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Carrington. Do you have proof? I do. I lied smoothly. I'll be sending it over to you shortly. I just thought you should be prepared. As I hung up, I watched Trevor exit the building, looking stressed. Good. The seeds of doubt had been planted. Over the next few weeks, I continued my campaign. Anonymous tips to clients about Trevor's supposed unethical practices. Whispers in the right ears about his alleged incompetence. It wasn't long before I heard he'd been put on probation, but that wasn't enough. I wanted him to feel real fear. Late one night, I left a note on his car. I know what you did. You'll pay. Simple, but effective. The next day, I watched from across the street as Trevor found the note. His face paled, and he looked around wildly, searching for the unseen threat. I smiled to myself. Let him sweat. A week later, I arranged for Trevor to be publicly embarrassed at a major industry event. I'd hired an actress to pose as a former client, confronting him loudly about his unethical practices. I stood in the back of the room, watching as the scene unfolded. The actress approached Trevor, her voice carrying across the crowded room. You, Trevor Sanders, how dare you show your face here after what you did? Trevor turned, his face a mask of confusion. I'm sorry, do I know you? Don't play dumb with me, she spat. You used my company's confidential information for your own gain. You're nothing but a fraud. The room fell silent, all eyes on Trevor. He stammered. There must be some mistake. I've never. No mistake. The actress cut him off. I've already reported you to the ethics board. Your career is over, Sanders. As she stormed off, leaving Trevor standing there shell-shocked, I felt a surge of satisfaction. His reputation was in tatters, just like he'd shattered my marriage. But my victory was short-lived. The next day, I received a call from my lawyer, Sandra. Blake, we've got a problem, she said, her voice tense. Trevor and Lena have filed a lawsuit against you. They're accusing you of defamation and harassment. I gripped the phone tighter. On what grounds? They claim you've been deliberately sabotaging Trevor's career and Lena's social standing. They've got some circumstantial evidence, but nothing concrete yet. Can they prove any of it? Not yet, Sandra replied. But Blake, you need to be careful. If they find any solid evidence linking you to these incidents, we could be in trouble. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Understood. What's our next move? We need to go on the offensive, she said. I'm going to dig into their backgrounds, see if we can find anything to discredit them. In the meantime, lay low. Don't give them any more ammunition. As I hung up, I felt a mix of anger and excitement. So, Lena and Trevor wanted to play hardball? Fine. I'd show them just how ruthless I could be. I picked up my phone again, dialing a familiar number. Melissa? It's Blake. I need your help with something. My sister arrived at my house an hour later, concern etched on her face. Blake, what's going on? You sounded worried on the phone. I ushered her inside, checking to make sure we weren't being watched. Lena and Trevor have filed a lawsuit against me. They're claiming I've been harassing them. Melissa's eyes widened. Have you? I met her gaze steadily. What do you think? She sighed, shaking her head. Oh, Blake, what have you done? What I had to do, I replied firmly. They thought they could destroy my life and walk away unscathed. I'm just evening the score. Melissa sat down heavily on the couch. And now they're fighting back. Blake, this has to stop. You're going to end up destroying yourself along with them. I paced the room, unable to contain my energy. I can't stop now, Melissa. I won't let them win. Is that what this is about? She asked softly. Winning? I whirled to face her. It's about justice. About making sure they pay for what they've done. Melissa stood up, placing a hand on my arm. Blake, listen to yourself. This isn't justice, it's revenge. And it's consuming you. I shrugged off her hand. I don't expect you to understand. Will you help me or not? She searched my face for a long moment before nodding reluctantly. What do you need me to do? I need you to be my alibi, I said. If anyone asks, I've been with you during the times these incidents occurred. Melissa's face fell. You want me to lie for you? I want you to help me protect myself, I countered. Will you do it? After a long pause, she nodded. All right, Blake, but promise me you'll be careful. I don't want to see you get hurt. I smiled grimly. Don't worry about me, Melissa. I'm not the one who needs to be afraid. As she left, I turned my attention back to the matter at hand. Lena and Trevor thought they could intimidate me with legal threats. They were about to learn just how outmatched they really were. The courthouse loomed before me, a monument to justice. Or so they claimed. I straightened my tie, feeling the weight of the upcoming battle settle on my shoulders. Sandra, my lawyer, stood beside me, her face a mask of professional calm. Remember, she said quietly, let me do the talking. Don't let them provoke you into saying anything that could be used against us. I nodded, my jaw clenched. As we climbed the steps, I saw them. Lena and Trevor, standing with their lawyer. Lena's eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I'd married. Then her gaze hardened, and she turned away. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. Our lawyers made their opening statements, each painting a vastly different picture of the situation. Lena and Trevor's lawyer, a sharp-looking woman named Rachel, spoke first. Your Honor, my clients have been subjected to a systematic campaign of harassment and defamation by Mr. Carrington. He has deliberately sabotaged Mr. Sanders' career and Mrs. Carrington's social standing out of a misguided desire for revenge. I gritted my teeth, fighting the urge to object. Sandra squeezed my arm. a silent reminder to stay calm. When it was her turn, Sandra stood, her voice clear and confident. Your Honor, these accusations are baseless. Mr. Carrington has been dealing with the emotional fallout of his wife's infidelity and abandonment. Any actions he may have taken were solely in response to the harm inflicted upon him by the plaintiffs. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, looked between the two parties. I've reviewed the evidence submitted by both sides. Mr. Carrington, do you have any comment on these accusations? I stood, meeting the judge's gaze. Your Honor, I categorically deny any involvement in the incidents described by the plaintiffs. I've been focused on rebuilding my life after my wife's betrayal, not on seeking revenge. Lena's voice cut through the courtroom. That's a lie. You've been tormenting us for months. The judge banged her gavel. Mrs. Carrington, you will refrain from outbursts, or I'll have you removed from this courtroom. As I sat back down, I caught Trevor's eye. He was glaring at me, his fists clenched at his sides. I allowed myself a small, cold smile. Let them fume. They couldn't prove anything. The legal battle raged on for weeks. Each side presented evidence, called witnesses, and made impassioned arguments. Through it all, I maintained my innocence, even as Sandra worked tirelessly to discredit Lena and Trevor's claims. One particularly tense day, Trevor took the stand. Rachel questioned him about the incidents at his workplace. Mr. Sanders, can you describe the impact these events have had on your career? Trevor's voice shook slightly as he answered. It's been devastating. Clients I've worked with for years suddenly don't trust me. My boss put me on probation. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering where the next attack will come from. I leaned over to Sandra, whispering, he's laying it on thick. Isn't he? She shushed me, her eyes never leaving Trevor. Rachel continued. And do you believe Mr. Carrington is responsible for these events? Objection. Sandra stood. Calls for speculation. The judge nodded. Sustained. Mr. Sanders, please limit your responses to facts, not beliefs. As Trevor stepped down from the stand, his eyes met mine. The hatred I saw there almost made me laugh. If he only knew the half of it. The turning point came when Sandra uncovered evidence of Lena and Trevor's own unethical actions. Emails showing they'd been planning their affair for months before Lena left me. Financial records indicating they'd been siphoning money from our joint accounts. Sandra presented this evidence to the court with a flourish. Your Honor, this clearly shows that the plaintiffs have unclean hands in this matter. They accuse my client of harming them, but they themselves have acted in bad faith from the beginning. The judge reviewed the new evidence, her expression grave. After what felt like an eternity, she spoke. In light of this new information, I am dismissing the case against Mr. Carrington. Mrs. Carrington, Mr. Sanders, I suggest you consult with your lawyer about the potential legal ramifications of your actions. As the gavel fell, I felt a wave of triumph wash over me. Lena and Trevor sat stunned, their faces pale with shock. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Sandra fielded most of the questions, but one reporter managed to get close enough to shove a microphone in my face. Mr. Carrington, how do you feel about the dismissal of the case? I looked directly into the camera, my voice steady. I'm relieved that the truth has come to light. I've maintained my innocence from the beginning, and today, justice has been served. As we pushed through the crowd to my waiting car, I caught sight of Lena and Trevor huddled with their lawyer. Lena was crying, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Trevor looked shell-shocked, his earlier bravado completely gone. For a moment, I felt a twinge of something, not quite regret, but a realization of how far we'd all fallen. Then I pushed the feeling aside. They made their choices. Now they had to live with the consequences. In the car, Sandra turned to me, her expression serious. Blake, we won this round, but it's not over. The family court still has to rule on the divorce settlement. I nodded, my jaw set. I know, but after today, I think we've got the upper hand. She sighed. Don't get overconfident. Lena's lawyer is good. They'll fight tooth and nail for every penny. Let them, I replied, staring out the window at the city passing by. I've got fight left in me yet. As we drove away from the courthouse, I felt a mix of emotions. Relief at having won this battle. anger at what Lena and Trevor had put me through, and beneath it all, a steely determination to see this through to the end. The war wasn't over, but I was more resolved than ever to emerge victorious, no matter the cost. The family court's decision hit me like a punch to the gut. Despite Sandra's best efforts, the judge had awarded Lena half of our assets in the divorce settlement. As I sat in my now half-empty house, staring at the spaces where artwork and furniture used to be, I felt a mixture of rage and an odd sense of liberation. The phone rang, breaking the silence. It was Marcus, an old friend I hadn't spoken to in months. "Blake? It's Marcus. I heard about the divorce settlement. How are you holding up?" I let out a bitter laugh. "How do you think? Half of everything I've worked for, gone in the blink of an eye." Marcus's voice was sympathetic but firm. "Listen, I might have something that could help. A business opportunity. Are you interested?" I sat up straighter, intrigued despite myself. "What kind of opportunity?" "It's a new tech startup," Marcus explained. "They're looking for investors. I've seen their projections, Blake. This could be huge." I hesitated. Most of my liquid assets were tied up in the divorce settlement. "I'm not sure I have the capital right now, Marcus." "That's the beauty of it," he said, excitement creeping into his voice. "They're not just looking for money. They need someone with your business acumen to help guide the company. You'd be getting in on the ground floor." As Marcus laid out the details, I felt a spark of hope ignite in my chest. This could be exactly what I needed: a fresh start, a chance to rebuild. "All right," I said finally. "I'm in. Set up a meeting." Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into this new venture. The work was challenging, exhilarating in a way I hadn't felt in years. As the business began to take shape, I felt my old confidence returning. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I ran into Sandra in the lobby. "Blake," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "You're looking well." I nodded, offering a small smile. "Things are looking up. How are you?" She hesitated, then said, "Actually, I'm glad I ran into you. I've heard some rumors about Lena and Trevor. I think you should know." My jaw clenched at the mention of their names. "What kind of rumors?" Sandra lowered her voice. "Word is, they're having financial troubles. Apparently, Trevor's got a gambling problem. They've been trying to keep it quiet, but..." I absorbed this information, a cold smile spreading across my face. "Is that so? How interesting." Sandra gave me a warning look. "Blake, whatever you're thinking, don't. You've just started to get your life back on track." I held up my hands, the picture of innocence. "I'm not thinking anything, Sandra. Just processing the information." She didn't look convinced, but nodded. "All right. Just be careful, okay?" As she walked away, my mind was already racing with possibilities. Lena and Trevor were struggling financially. Perhaps it was time to twist the knife a little deeper. Over the next few days, I made some discreet inquiries. It didn't take long to confirm that Trevor had indeed been frequenting some of the city's less reputable casinos. More importantly, I discovered he'd been trying to secure loans to cover his losses. With this information in hand, I set my plan in motion. A few well-placed phone calls ensured that Trevor's loan applications were mysteriously denied. Each time he thought he'd found a solution to his financial woes, I made sure it slipped through his fingers. I knew I was walking a dangerous line. If anyone traced these actions back to me, I could find myself in legal trouble again. But the thrill of finally having the upper hand was too intoxicating to resist. One evening, as I sat in my home office reviewing some documents for the new business, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I know what you're doing. Meet me at the Bluebird Cafe." I stared at the text message, my heart racing. Who could have sent this? I contemplated ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my keys and headed to the Bluebird Cafe. The cafe was dimly lit, with only a few patrons scattered around. I scanned the room, my eyes finally landing on a familiar face. Trevor. I approached his table, my jaw clenched. "What's this about?" Trevor looked up, his eyes bloodshot and sunken. "Sit down, Blake. We need to talk." I hesitated, then took the seat across from him. "Make it quick." Trevor leaned forward, his voice low. "I know you've been sabotaging my loan applications. I know you're behind the rumors about my gambling. I kept my face neutral. That's quite an accusation. Got any proof? Cut the crap, Trevor spat. We both know what you're doing. I'm here to tell you to stop. I leaned back, a cold smile on my face. Or what? Trevor's hands shook as he gripped his coffee mug. Or I'll go public with everything. The harassment, the threats, all of it. I laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet cafe. Go ahead. Who do you think they'll believe? The successful businessman or the gambling addict who stole another man's wife? Trevor's face crumpled. Please, Blake. We're desperate. Lena. She's talking about leaving me. For a moment, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. Then I squashed it down. That's not my problem. But it is, Trevor insisted. You're the one causing all this. If you just stop. I cut him off. I'm not causing anything. Your choices led you here, Trevor. You and Lena made your bed. Now lie in it. I stood up, ready to leave, but Trevor grabbed my arm. Wait, there's something else you should know. I yanked my arm away. What? Trevor took a deep breath. Lena's pregnant. The words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered back, my mind reeling. What did you say? She's pregnant, Trevor repeated. We found out last week. She didn't want me to tell you. But I thought you should know. I stared at him, a storm of emotions raging inside me. Anger, betrayal, and something else. Something I couldn't quite name. Congratulations, I said finally, my voice cold. I hope you're ready for fatherhood. Because I can assure you, neither of you will get a penny from me. As I turned to leave, Trevor called out, Blake, please. We need help. I paused at the door, looking back at him. You should have thought of that before you destroyed my life. I walked out into the cool night air, my mind spinning. Lena, pregnant, with Trevor's child. The final nail in the coffin of our marriage. As I drove home, a plan began to form in my mind. If Trevor and Lena thought they could use this pregnancy to manipulate me, they were sorely mistaken. It was time to take my revenge to the next level. The next morning, I placed a call to Jack, my journalist friend. Jack? It's Blake. I've got another story for you. This one's going to blow the lid off everything. Jack's voice was eager. I'm listening. I took a deep breath. Trevor Sanders, the man who's been in the news lately for his gambling problems? I have it on good authority that he's been embezzling from his company to cover his debts. That's a big claim, Blake, Jack said cautiously. You sure about this? Positive, I lied smoothly. I've got documentation to prove it. How soon can you run the story? Jack hesitated. If what you're saying is true, this could ruin him. That's the idea, I said coldly. As I hung up, I felt a twinge of something. Not quite guilt, but a realization of how far I'd come. The Blake of a year ago would have been horrified at what I was doing. But that Blake was gone, destroyed by Lena's betrayal. Over the next few days, I watched as the story broke. Trevor's name was plastered across every news outlet in the city. His company announced an internal investigation. His few remaining friends distanced themselves. I sat in my office, watching the chaos unfold on the news. My phone buzzed with a text from Lena. How could you do this? You've destroyed us. I typed back a simple response. You started this war. I'm just finishing it. As I set my phone down, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. Lena and Trevor had thought they could build their happiness on the ruins of my life. Now they were learning the hard way that actions have consequences. My new business was flourishing, my revenge was complete, and for the first time in months, I felt truly in control. Whatever the future held, I was ready to face it head-on. 2 years had passed since that fateful Valentine's Day. My life had taken a dramatic turn for the better. The tech startup Marcus had introduced me to had become a roaring success, catapulting me back to the top of the business world. I had more money, more power, and more respect than ever before. As I walked down the bustling city street, heading to a board meeting, I barely recognized the man I used to be. The heartbroken, vengeful Blake was a distant memory. Or so I thought. That's when I saw them. Lena and Trevor were huddled on a street corner, looking nothing like the glamorous couple they once were. Lena's designer clothes had been replaced by a worn-out coat. Trevor's confident swagger was gone, replaced by a defeated slouch. Between them stood a small child, no more than a year old. For a moment, I considered walking past them, but something made me stop. Lena? Trevor? I called out, my voice neutral. They turned, their eyes widening in recognition. Lena clutched the child closer to her. Blake, she whispered, her voice hoarse. We. Trevor stepped forward, his face a mask of desperation. Blake, please. We need help. We've lost everything. I raised an eyebrow. Everything? How's that possible? Last I heard, you had half of my assets, Lena. Lena's face crumpled. It's gone. All of it. Trevor's gambling, bad investments. We've got nothing left. I looked at the child, who was staring up at me with curious eyes. And this is our daughter, Trevor said quietly. Lily. She's 18 months old. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of emotions. I see. And what exactly do you want from me? Lena stepped forward, her eyes pleading. Blake, I know we have no right to ask, but we're desperate. We can't even afford a place to stay. Lily, she deserves better than this. I looked at them, really looked at them. The couple who had once seemed so in love, so sure of their decision to destroy my life, now stood before me broken and defeated. You're right, I said coldly. You have no right to ask me for anything. Lena flinched as if I'd slapped her. Blake, please. I know what we did was wrong. I've regretted it every day since. If I could take it back? I held up a hand, cutting her off. But you can't take it back, Lena. You made your choice. You both did. Trevor spoke up, his voice trembling. We know that, and we've paid for it. But Lily, she's innocent in all this. Please, if not for us, then for her. I looked at the child again. She had Lena's eyes, I realized with a start. For a moment, I imagined what life might have been like if Lena and I had had a child of our own. Then I pushed the thought away. Let me tell you something, I said, my voice hard. 2 years ago, you two destroyed my life. You took everything from me, my wife, my home, my sense of security. You left me with nothing but pain and anger. Lena was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Trevor looked like he wanted to sink into the ground. I continued, I spent months plotting my revenge. I wanted to see you suffer the way I had suffered, and I succeeded. I watched as your reputations crumbled, as your finances dried up, as your perfect little world fell apart. We know, Trevor said quietly. We know it was you behind it all. I nodded. Yes, it was. And do you know what I felt when I saw your lives unraveling? Satisfaction. Joy, even. I thought it would make me feel better, seeing you brought low. Did it? Lena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I paused, considering. For a while, yes. But then I realized something. The more I focused on destroying you, the more I was destroying myself. I was letting my anger and bitterness consume me, turning me into someone I didn't recognize. I took a deep breath, looking at each of them in turn. So I made a choice. I chose to let go, to focus on rebuilding my life instead of tearing yours down. And you know what? That's when things really turned around for me. Lena and Trevor exchanged glances, clearly unsure where I was going with this. The success I have now? I continued. It's not because of my revenge. It's because I finally stopped letting your betrayal define me. I moved on. I built something new, something better. I crouched down, looking the child Lily in the eyes. And now here we are. You're asking me for help, after everything that's happened. We understand if you say no, Trevor said quietly. We didn't know where else to turn. I stood up, brushing off my suit. You're right. I could say no. I could walk away and leave you to fend for yourselves. And a part of me wants to do just that. Lena's face fell, but I held up a hand. But I'm not going to do that. Because if I did, I'd be no better than you were 2 years ago. I pulled out my phone, typing quickly. I'm texting you the address of a shelter I work with. They have a program for families getting back on their feet. Go there, tell them I sent you. They'll give you a place to stay, help you find work. Lena's eyes widened in disbelief. Blake, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, I replied, my voice firm. Just take this opportunity and do better. Not for me, not even for yourselves, but for her. I nodded towards Lily. Trevor nodded, tears in his eyes. Thank you, Blake. We don't deserve this kindness. No, you don't, I agreed. But she does. And maybe this is how we all finally move on. I turned to leave, but Lena called out, Blake? I truly am sorry. For everything. I paused, looking back at them. I know. Good luck to you both. As I walked away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The last remnants of anger and bitterness that I'd been carrying for 2 years seemed to dissipate with each step. I pulled out my phone, dialing Marcus's number. Hey, it's me. Remember that charity initiative we were discussing? I think I'm ready to move forward with it. Let's set up a meeting. As I hung up, I smiled to myself. The future stretched out before me, full of possibilities. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see what it held. The months following my encounter with Lena and Trevor flew by in a whirlwind of activity. My business continued to thrive, but more importantly, I found myself opening up to new experiences and relationships. One sunny Saturday morning, I found myself at a local coffee shop, waiting for my date to arrive. Sarah, a woman I'd met through a mutual friend, had caught my attention with her quick wit and genuine smile. As I sipped my coffee, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nervousness. The bell above the door chimed, and Sarah walked in, her red hair catching the sunlight. She spotted me and waved, making her way over. Hi, Blake, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Sorry I'm a bit late. Traffic was a nightmare. I smiled, feeling surprisingly at ease. No worries. I'm just glad you made it. As we chatted over coffee, I found myself laughing more than I had in years. Sarah's stories about her work as a pediatrician were both heartwarming and hilarious. So there I was, she said, her eyes twinkling, trying to examine this 5-year-old who was convinced I was a spy sent by the Tooth Fairy. He kept trying to check my pockets for stolen teeth. I chuckled, shaking my head. And how did you convince him otherwise? Sarah grinned. I didn't. I just played along. Told him I was a double agent working for the kids. By the end of the appointment, he was showing me all his loose teeth voluntarily. As our laughter subsided, Sarah's expression grew more serious. Blake, can I ask you something? I nodded, curious. Of course. Why did you agree to go out with me? She asked. I mean, I've heard bits and pieces about your past. A messy divorce, some personal setbacks. I guess I'm just wondering, are you really ready for this? I paused, considering her question. It was a fair one, and I appreciated her directness. You're right, I said slowly. I've been through a lot in the past few years. For a long time, I wasn't sure if I'd ever be ready to open myself up to someone again. Sarah nodded, listening intently. I continued, but recently, I've come to realize something. The pain of my past doesn't have to define my future. I've spent too long looking backward. I'm ready to look forward now. A smile spread across Sarah's face. That's really beautiful, Blake. And mature. I admire that. As we left the coffee shop, walking side by side in the warm sunshine, I felt a sense of possibility I hadn't experienced in years. Sarah's hand brushed against mine, and I found myself taking it, our fingers intertwining naturally. So, Sarah said, glancing up at me, what's next for the forward-looking Blake? I smiled, squeezing her hand gently. Well, I've been thinking about getting more involved in the community, maybe doing some volunteer work. Any suggestions? Sarah's eyes lit up. Actually, the hospital where I work runs a mentoring program for at-risk youth. They're always looking for successful business people to volunteer. Would you be interested in something like that? I nodded, feeling a spark of excitement. That sounds perfect. Actually, I'd love to learn more about it. As we continued our walk, discussing possibilities for the future, I realized something profound. The Blake who had been consumed by revenge and bitterness was truly gone. In his place was a man looking forward to what life had to offer, ready to give back and make a difference. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of new experiences. I threw myself into the mentoring program Sarah had suggested, finding unexpected fulfillment in working with young people who reminded me so much of myself at their age. One afternoon, as I was leaving the community center after a mentoring session, I ran into Marcus. "Blake," he called out, jogging over to me. "What are you doing here?" I grinned, clapping him on the shoulder. "Believe it or not, I'm volunteering. Mentoring program for kids. What about you?" Marcus shook his head, a bemused smile on his face. "Teaching a coding class for adults looking to change careers. Who would have thought we'd both end up here, huh?" We decided to grab a quick coffee, catching up on each other's lives. "So," Marcus said, stirring his latte, "I hear through the grapevine that you're seeing someone. Sarah, right? How's that going?" I couldn't help the smile that spread across my face. "It's going well. Really well, actually. She's something special, Marcus." Marcus leaned back, studying my face. "You know, I haven't seen you this happy in years, Blake. It's good to see." I nodded, feeling a sense of contentment wash over me. I am happy. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. As we parted ways, Marcus called out, "Hey, Blake, I'm really proud of you, man. You've come a long way." I nodded, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "Thanks, Marcus. I couldn't have done it without friends like you." As I walked home, I reflected on how much my life had changed. The bitterness that had once consumed me was gone, replaced by a sense of purpose and contentment. I had found new passions, new relationships, and a new version of myself. That evening, as I prepared for a board meeting, I received a text from Sarah. "Good luck today. Dinner later to celebrate?" I smiled, typing back a quick response. "Absolutely. Can't wait." With a spring in my step, I headed to the office, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The conference room buzzed with excitement as I stood at the head of the table, facing my board of directors. The atmosphere was electric, a far cry from the tense meetings of the past. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, unable to keep the smile from my face, "I'm pleased to announce that we've not only met our projected goals for this quarter, but we've exceeded them by 30%. A round of applause filled the room. I held up my hand, waiting for quiet. "But that's not all," I continued. "Our new community outreach program has been an overwhelming success. We've helped over 500 at-risk youth find internships and job opportunities in the tech sector." The room erupted in cheers again. As I looked around at the excited faces, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that went beyond mere financial success. After the meeting, I headed to the cafe where I was meeting Sarah for our celebration dinner. As I walked in, I saw her sitting at our usual table, her red hair catching the light. "There's my successful businessman," she said, standing to greet me with a kiss. I pulled her close, inhaling the familiar scent of her perfume. "Success is sweeter when shared," I replied. As we sat down, Sarah reached across the table, taking my hand. "Blake, there's something I want to talk to you about." I felt a momentary flutter of anxiety, but pushed it aside. "What is it?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I've been offered a position at a children's hospital in New York. It's an amazing opportunity, but it would mean moving." I felt my heart skip a beat. "New York? That's wow." She squeezed my hand. "I know it's a lot to take in, and I want you to know, I'm not asking you to make any decisions right now. I just wanted to be upfront about it." I nodded, processing the information. "When would you need to decide?" "They've given me 2 weeks," she replied, watching my face carefully. I took a deep breath, then smiled. "Well, then we have 2 weeks to figure out if my business can expand to New York, don't we?" Sarah's eyes widened. "Blake, are you saying?" I leaned in, kissing her softly. "I'm saying I love you, Sarah, and I'm not letting geography get in the way of that." As we continued our dinner, discussing the possibilities that lay ahead, I felt a sense of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. The future was bright, full of potential and new adventures. The next morning, as I was getting ready for work, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from an address I didn't recognize. Curious, I opened it. "Dear Blake, I hope this email finds you well. It's Lena. I know you probably never expected to hear from me again, and I wouldn't blame you if you deleted this without reading further. But if you're still reading, I want you to know how deeply sorry I am for everything that happened between us. I've spent a lot of time reflecting on my actions and the pain I caused you. There's no excuse for what I did, but I want you to know that I've learned from my mistakes. The past few years have been incredibly difficult, but they've also taught me valuable lessons about loyalty, honesty, and the true meaning of love. I don't expect forgiveness, Blake. I know I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I truly regret the hurt I caused you. I hope that you found happiness and peace in your life. Sincerely, Lena. I stared at the screen, a mix of emotions washing over me. After a moment, I hit reply. Lena, thank you for your email. I appreciate your apology and your honesty. The past is behind us now, and I've moved on with my life. I hope you found a way to do the same. Take care, Blake. As I hit send, I felt the last remnants of my past falling away. I was ready to embrace my future fully, without any lingering resentments or regrets. Later that week, I found myself sitting across from Lena in a small coffee shop. She looked different, older, more subdued. The confident, sometimes arrogant woman I had married was gone. Thank you for meeting me, Blake, she said, her voice quiet. I wasn't sure you would. I nodded, taking a sip of my coffee. I almost didn't, but I thought it might be good for both of us to have this conversation. Lena looked down at her hands. I've lost everything, Blake. My social standing, my friends, even Trevor. He left when the money ran out. I felt a twinge of something, not quite sympathy, but not the satisfaction I might have once felt either. I'm sorry to hear that, Lena. She looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. No, don't be sorry. It was all my fault. I was selfish and short-sighted. I threw away a good life, a good man. For what? A fling that didn't even last? I sat back, studying her. What do you want from me, Lena? She shook her head. Nothing. I don't deserve anything from you. I wanted you to know that I understand now. I see the pain I caused, and I'm truly, deeply sorry for it. I nodded slowly. I appreciate that, and I want you to know. I don't hate you anymore, Lena. I did for a long time, but I've moved on. I've found happiness in my life. A small, sad smile crossed her face. I'm glad to hear that, Blake. You deserve happiness. As I stood to leave, Lena reached out, touching my arm. Blake, do you think you could ever forgive me? I looked at her for a long moment. Lena, I've forgiven you. Not for your sake, but for mine. Holding on to that anger and bitterness, it was poisoning me. So yes, I've forgiven you. But that doesn't mean I want you in my life. She nodded, withdrawing her hand. I understand. Thank you, Blake, for everything. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't even realized I was missing. The chapter of my life that included Lena was truly, finally over. I pulled out my phone, dialing Sarah's number. Hey, I said when she answered. How do you feel about apartment hunting in New York this weekend? Her excited squeal made me laugh. As I hung up, I looked up at the clear blue sky, feeling lighter than I had in years. The future stretched out before me, bright and full of possibilities. I was ready to embrace it with open arms. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.